Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching a new series on what if Naruto lost his memories. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The ringing sound of a hammer striking metal was heard twice, followed by a softened thump. The ringing repeated twice more, followed by another soft thump. The bald man wielding the heavy hammer found solace in the smithy's daily sounds. More blows were delivered before the man took a much-needed break. While stepping out into the cool evening, he placed the half-finished sword in the coals to keep it warm. One more day, and I'll have that sword finished. At this rate, the daimyo will receive his order on time. Master Smith will be happy. The smith looked out over the mountain valley where he lived. As the evening breeze seemed to promise rain, his badly scarred face relaxed. He looked at the sleeping form of his 10-year-old apprentice and decided he wouldn't have to wake his junior student to stoke the forge tonight. The coals would keep the metal in good condition until morning. He lifted the boy and made his way up a narrow stairwell into the loft. The scarred man tucked the boy into his bed and fell asleep for a few hours. Four shapes moved through the forest canopy in silence. After too many years of dead ends, they had another lead to pursue. The mountains were in the distance, and the local lord had granted them permission to enter the remote valley. They'd know whether this was another dead end by dusk the next day, or if they'd found the object of their search. As the master smith examined his work, the scarred smith stood. He examined the length of the finished blade for flaws and found none. He gripped the hilt tightly and swung the blade at the target dummy. The blade cut a sufficient depth into the wood. The older man nodded once more as he examined the blade for the second time. There was no blemish on the blade where it had made contact. Ken, you have completed your assignment. You've learned enough about the trade to no longer be considered a student. The older man bowed to the younger and presented a simple sash that revealed his status as a blacksmith and weapon maker to all who saw him. His master's embroidered name was clearly visible on the end for all to see. "Thank you, master," said the young man. "Ken-san, since you are no longer a student but a full smith, you have the right to call me Kama." "Thank you very much, Kama-sensei." The older man smirked, but he knew the younger man was honoring him, so he let it go. Ken tied the sash around his waist so that the kanji of his name and his teacher's name were clearly visible as it hung. "I only need one more sword to finish the daimyo's order. If nothing goes wrong, I'll have it finished in 2 days." Kama nodded briefly and returned his attention to his remaining apprentice. "You stood there the entire time doing nothing while the coal bin was only half full. Let's get back to work." Before Kama could kick him, the boy dashed away and went back to work. Ken chuckled lightly as he returned to his work. As his thoughts wandered, his hands worked in well-practiced motions. Now that he was a full smith, he would be entitled to a portion of Kama's earnings from the contracts. He'd be able to think about his own smithy and possibly marriage in a year or two. There were several girls of age in the village, and something could be arranged for a fee. He looked into a bucket of water to see his face. On one side, a jigsaw pattern of scars and stitches was visible. The other appeared to have smooth skin but was actually melted scar tissue from burns. Among the scars, the remains of a blonde brow stood out. Ken shaved his head to make his patchy hair look better. "Wait, who am I kidding? No father would want his son-in-law to look like me without hefty remuneration, no matter how low-ranking the man is." Ken lowered his head, pressing the glowing red metal against the anvil. As he fell, his tears hissed against the steel. Ken began his work as the 3-beat sound of the smith rang from within the building. 4 ninjas stood nearby in the open. They detected no trained chakra sources nearby, and the genjutsu cast by the leader prevented all eyes from seeing the group. As a bug lit on the finger, one raised his hand. He listened and turned to face his comrades. My bugs detected normal civilian chakra levels in everyone who was present. The smithy is the one our sources told us about, but it appears we were mistaken in thinking it would be our friend. I'm not used to his scent. If this guy has been here for 8 years, I'm sure it's still the same. No one's scent changes that drastically. This individual is also 6 inches taller than our target. Even with a potential growth spurt, that is a significant difference. The shortest member of the group was looking through the building. Shino-kun and Kiba-kun, please wait. My eyes tell me something completely different. The chakra coils in the man are extremely developed. However, you are correct, Shino. He only has civilian chakra flowing through them. I'm picking up on some minor levels in his abdomen and forehead that could be seals. We should get closer to the man and examine him. Hinata, I know you want it to be him, but we need to be sure, the leader said to the younger woman. Kurenai-san, I know what I'm seeing. I'm not sure if it's him, but he was a ninja. It is worth looking into further. The ninja all made hand gestures, and 4 civilians took their place. Kurenai rang the gong on the post outside as the team approached the smithy. Kama knocked on the door. Who is pounding? This is Kama's smithy, the son of Suba. Hello, Kama-san. I am a daimyo agent in the Land of Fire. I've been told to look for people who might be able to work for him. Kurenai held up her local lord's authorization. Ken, I have your permission to come here and interview your apprentice. If he is acceptable, we have the right to buy his contract from you. Kurenai gave the man in front of her a gentle smile. She had not lied to him at all. She simply stated a slightly altered version of the truth. She was an agent of the Lord of the Land of Fire as a ninja of Konohakagore no Sato, the village hidden in the leaves. If they found the person they were looking for, they could use whatever legal means they could to bring them back. In this case, it would be by purchasing Ken's apprenticeship. If only you had arrived 2 days ago, the man bemoaned. Ken is no longer my student. He completed all guild requirements and was awarded his sash as a peer. Ken. These foreigners would like to speak with you. Ken exited the work area after placing his work in the forge to keep it warm. His cerulean blue eyes were fixed on the 4 people standing outside. My name is Ken. Can I assist you? Hinata exclaimed softly as she gazed at the shattered face. Kiba and Shino both flinched slightly at the sight. Hinata was unconcerned about the blue eyes' lack of recognition. She recognized those eyes. They continued to haunt her dreams at night. Ken had seen far too many people's reactions to his appearance. As Kurenai spoke to him, he tried to hide his pain. Kurenai is my name, Ken. I work for the daimyo of the Land of Fire. He is looking for people with specific skills, and you were brought to our attention. We'd like to interview you to see if you're a good fit for his needs. Ken turned to face Kama, who shrugged, you are your own person. You don't need my permission to contact them. What exactly do you want to know, Kurenai-san? Ken inquired. We'd like to talk to you about your past and administer a couple of minor tests. If everything goes as planned, we'd like you to join us. Of course, appropriate compensation would be arranged. Ken paused for a beat before responding. I'll let you do it as long as you're quick about it. I have obligations to fulfill, and a sword will rust if I am away from it for too long. How did you end up in this valley, Ken? Kurenai asked, nodding. I'm not sure. I awoke at the foot of the mountain nearly 8 years ago. I was hurt, badly burned, and cut. The locals thought I'd die, but I survived, albeit badly scarred. I took an apprenticeship with Kama-san in order to repay the daimyo for my care. My debts have all been paid in full, and he informed me this morning that my smithing training has been completed to his standards. Do you remember anything before waking up in this area? I don't remember anything before this place, Ken replied. It's intriguing, but it fits the information we have. Now we have a simple test to complete, Ken. Please remove your shirt and allow us to examine your stomach. That's an odd request, Kurenai-san. I understand, but it is required for our task. Ken shrugged and took off his shirt. Hinata and Kurenai both had to fight back nosebleeds from the muscular build Ken's shirt had concealed. He wasn't bulky, but his muscles were larger than most men they were used to seeing due to his years of hard labor. Several prominent scars ran down his neck and onto his chest. Kurenai gently placed 2 fingers on either side of his abdomen, funneling chakra between them. Slowly, black lines resembling seals appeared on Ken's skin. Shino took out a parchment with a design on it and placed it next to Ken's stomach markings. They were identical. It is him, Hinata said quietly. We tracked him down. When the black line spread further out from the center, Kurenai was about to stop funneling chakra. More designs appeared around the edges that had nothing to do with the parchment. Kurenai-san, the primary seal matches. This is the individual we are looking for, Shino stated. It appears that additional seals were placed over the original for unknown reasons. When the conversation turned to seals, Ken stepped back. He had no idea what was going on and was desperate to escape these strangers. I don't think I want to consider the Land of Fire's offer. Please leave. Kama had already withdrawn from the group. His gaze was drawn to the newly revealed seal on Ken's stomach, and he made gestures to ward off evil. Who are you? He exclaimed. Do not be concerned, Kama-san, Shino said. It's not a bad thing. He was once a ninja, and the design of his body limits his ability to be one. Kama was wary, but his warding gestures came to an end. What did he do to deserve such a label? Kurenai turned to face Kama. We are not aware of anything he did. We've only been told to find him. She turned to face Ken. Ken, you can join us either willingly or coercively. You were once our friend, and you will be once we learn what happened and free your mind. Please do not force us to do something we will all regret. Ken sat down on the ground as the information deluged him. Who? What was I? Hinata finally spoke up, tears streaming down her cheeks. You are Naruto Uzumaki, a ninja from Konohakagure no Sato in the Land of Fire. You are the Yondaime Hokage's only son. But, above all, you are my husband. Ken passed out. Kiba was amused by the unexpected turn of events. Normally, Hinata, it's you who faints, not him. Kurenai fixed his gaze on Kiba. With one more word, Kiba, you will not like the genjutsu you have found yourself in. Is that clear? Kiba blanched and quickly nodded. Kama wasn't a complete jerk. He realized now that these seemingly ordinary people were actually dangerous ninja. He entered the foundry and partially closed the door while they were talking amongst themselves. I suppose you can leave now that you've found what you're looking for. Please? They were cut off by a groan. Ken was rubbing his face while closing his eyes. If I'm outside on the ground, that was some binge. You wouldn't believe the strange dream I had, Master. I had a dream that you made me a full smith and then told me I was a ninja married to a beautiful woman. Ken-san, you weren't drinking, and it happened. Please open your eyes. Ken slowly opened his eyes to see a tearful Hinata kneeling beside him, her hands clasped in front of her. Hi. He mumbled something to her. Hello, Hinata said slowly. I've missed you, my love. I don't recognize you. Please tell me your name. Hinata Uzumaki. Hinata said, tell me, beautiful sunbeam. What occurred? How did I end up here? We'd only been married a month when you vanished on a routine delivery mission. All that is known is that you vanished while delivering a message to the land of birds. Hunters discovered a battle site with a lot of blood and some equipment, but no body or body remains. The rest can wait until we get him home, Kurenai said. We must get started as soon as possible. It would normally take us nearly a week to return, and who knows how long that will take now that Naruto is in this condition. Ken. What? Ken is my name. It is the only name I know, and it will remain my name until I learn otherwise. I'm not sure what's going on, but please don't take away the little stability I still have right now, Ken spoke quietly. Hinata bit her lower lip to keep from crying out to Ken, but Kurenai nodded. Very good, Ken. That is the name we will use for the time being. We also won't be able to leave until the day after tomorrow at the earliest. I have a contract to finish for the daimyo, and I will keep my word, Ken informed them. 12 days. Kiba screamed. We need to get back to Konoha as soon as possible, not stay here for another 2 days. Ken focused his attention on Kiba. I will keep my promise. If you try to take me before my work is completed, I will fight you. I will leave without complaint once my work here is completed. We agree, Ken-san, Kurenai said before Kiba could respond. Keeping your word was an important aspect of your character as Naruto. It is clear that some aspects of your personality have not changed. Ken nodded and turned away from the ninja quartet to return to the forge. Kiba approached Kurenai and got in her face. I've got better things to do than stay in this hick town. We were supposed to finish this mission in a week or 2. We've been away from the village for 2 weeks. With Naruto in tow and not being able to use chakra, we're looking at another 2 or 3 weeks before we get home. Back in Konoha, I have people waiting for me. Kiba, we all do. Remember that we all have families now. You volunteered to participate in this mission. Nobody forced you to come, Kiba was hissed at by Kurenai. Kiba simply muttered something under his breath and turned away. He couldn't disagree with Kurenai. He had offered to accompany us. He'd only done it for Hinata's sake, expecting this trip to be a waste of time looking for a dead man. All of his efforts had been for naught now that the person had been discovered. He'd never have Hinata again. Hinata and Shino watched Kiba flee in rage. He does care a great deal for you, Hinata, Shino said quietly. Shino is familiar to me, but my heart has never belonged to him. Naruto has always had it. Kiba should accept that he will never be more than a friend, Hinata responded solemnly. Ken worked slowly on the sword. Pounding the metal into the desired shape was a calming experience for him. After the events of the day, he needed all the peace and quiet he could get. He was a ninja, according to those who knew him. He'd heard tales of what ninja could accomplish. They were like magicians and assassins rolled into one. Ken had never seen one in the 8 years he had lived in the valley. He was supposed to be one of these assassins. Would that explain why he was so disfigured? Why was his memory blank before waking up here? When Ken put the hammer down, the sounds in the forge stopped. For the 1000th time, he closed his eyes and tried to think of things to do before his arrival. As usual, nothing came to mind. Even remembering the beautiful woman who claimed to be his wife provided no spark of recollection. Just complete your work. Consider all of this after the sword is finished. If you don't concentrate, you'll mess it up and have to start over. Ken swung the heavy hammer again, and the 3-beat sounds rang out again. Kurenai had no intention of just sitting around the forge. Kama mentioned a small traveler's inn in the nearby village. She sent Kiba and Shino to scout it out and find a pair of rooms to keep them busy for an hour or two. Hinata waited until the men were no longer visible before turning to Kurenai. They're no longer there. What did you want to talk about with me away from them? Kurenai grinned. Hinata was no slouch at seeing beneath the surface. I was wondering how you were doing, Hinata. Hinata said quietly, I'm fine, Kurenai. Hinata, I've known you for over 20 years. To see through a lie, I don't have to be a Hyuga. I also miss you addressing me as Kurenai-sensei. I know our relationship has changed since you lost Naruto, but I am still here for you. As a teacher, or as a big sister if necessary, Kurenai spoke quietly as well. Hinata simply nodded. Kurenai's concern for Hinata was evident in the old team accompanying her on these missions. The anger she felt had long passed, but the closeness the two women once shared had never returned on Hinata's part. Kurenai, you should go down to the village. I'll arrive around dusk. Kurenai simply nodded and walked away. Hinata stood silently in the forge's shadows for hours, watching Ken work. She was surprised to see Naruto after all this time. But he was no longer her Naruto. His face, which she could recall, was no longer there. His memories of her are either gone or sealed off. But seeing his eyes, those soft sad cerulean blue eyes, had given her hope again. Despite everything else, those eyes had not changed. You know, for a ninja, you're quite noticeable, Hinata-san, Ken said. Hinata grinned. She had made no attempt to conceal her presence. I'm as unnoticed as I wish to be, Ken-kun, she said softly. You'd never know I was here if I hadn't wished it. Ken laughed. It was difficult to imagine this small, beautiful woman as a deadly ninja. But something in her words bothered him. After all, the ninja were magicians. He came to a halt in his work to look at the small woman in the shadows. Have you murdered anyone? Yes, Ken-kun, I have. How many are there? He inquired, almost afraid to learn the answer. I killed 37 men and 4 women, Ken-kun. Ken couldn't detect any pride or sorrow in her words. It was just a simple factual statement, similar to what he would say when discussing his work. Has Naruto been murdered? Yes, Naruto-kun has also killed. I'm not sure how many because we didn't talk about it. Ken nodded and resumed hammering. Ken turned around at dusk to find Hinata gone, and he had no idea when she had gone. Ken completed the sword in the time he predicted. Kama was pleased with the outcome and thanked Ken for upholding his end of the bargain by completing the contract. Ken was then led back to the forge by the older smith. It'll be quiet without you, Ken. The boy won't be ready for heavy work for a few years, and I'm not as young as I used to be. The daimyo will seek out other smiths to complete his contracts. But, if the ninja thing doesn't work out for you, you know where the forge is and are welcome to return. Ken gave a crooked, terrified smile. It almost sounds like you're going to miss me and think well of me. Kama sighed and grumbled, there is no such thing. I'm just thinking about my business. You're good at your job, and there aren't many people around to take your place. Ken felt comforted by the older man's words. He was saying that Ken would be missed for more than just his ability to work. The thought that he was held in high regard by someone warmed the scarred man's heart. "One more thing, Ken," Kama said as he followed the younger man up the stairs to pack his meager belongings. Kara approached the anvil and lifted the heavy hammer Ken used on a daily basis. "Bring it with you. It is the best option for you. My last lazy apprentice is a scrawny young man, and I have my own hammer. It would be useless here and would just collect dust. I hope you can put it to good use." "I would be honored to take it with me, Master," Ken said formally. Kama simply nodded and turned to walk back to the main house. Ken awoke an hour before sunrise and finished his packing. His belongings were contained in a small pack, which contained some spare clothes, grooming items, and a number of small items he had fashioned from scrap metal. The hammer was wrapped in cloth and fastened to his upper back with a crude rope harness. He woke the boy up for a quiet goodbye and so the boy wouldn't be yelled at for sleeping in for once. He went outside and found 4 ninja waiting for him. "I'm ready," he said as he approached the road leading out of the mountain valley. The journey was moving much faster than the ninja had anticipated. They expected Ken to walk at a normal civilian pace of about 3 miles per hour. Instead, Ken trotted along the road at twice that speed for hours without stopping. His leg strength and endurance were still comparable to those of a ninja who did not use chakra to enhance their abilities. Ken's only concession to other travelers was to cover his scarred face with a light hat and veil. Military patrols would frequently stop Ken while the ninja remained in the trees or fields nearby. The ninja had left him with papers stating that he was traveling to a position in the Land of Fire and that removing the veil quickly would persuade the soldiers of its importance in his travels. The travelers arrived at Konoha's gates around the middle of the 5th day. Ken swallowed nervously as he stared at the massive doors. Beyond these gates lay something he both desired and feared, his past. "The Kurenai team has returned from a retrieval mission. We have orders to report directly to the tower with this man if we succeed," Kurenai said, holding out a copy of the mission orders to the Chunin on guard duty. The Chunin took a quick look over the document, quickly reading the section about returning with a successful mission and the proper seals on the orders. He nodded and motioned the team into the village. His only thought was, why was such an experienced team accompanying a civilian blacksmith? The hammer on the man's back was impressive, but the Chunin was concerned by the hidden face. Orders were still orders. He'll have to abandon his hammer at the gate. Inside Konoha, only licensed shinobi and craftsmen are permitted to possess weapons. If everything checks out, he can reclaim it later. Ken untied his hammer's rope harness and handed it to the Chunin. Under the weight, the younger man leaned sharply to one side, but quickly stood straight again. "The guest's name for the logbook, Kurenai-san?" inquired the Chunin. "Ken." Kurenai replied, "No family name," as the group entered. Ken was taken aback by the sights in front of him. The local daimyo's hold in the valley was a minor holding in the mountain country. The first building he saw upon entering Konoha was much larger. This city was referred to as a village? What would the cities be like if that were true? Ken just stared at the civilians, buildings, and ninja moving along the rooftops. His bumpkin gawking had caused the group to pause twice in the first 100 yards into Konoha. "Ken-kun, you can look around later," Hinata said. "We can show you around Konoha later, but we need to get to the Hokage's tower first." Ken nodded and followed Kurenai's lead toward the mountain in the large building with the kanji for fire written on it. The mountain behind it was adorned with 6 carved faces. "Who are those people?" he grumbled. Hinata responded to his question. "Those are the faces of Konoha's 6 Hokages. The 4th is Naruto's, your father. That one with the spiky hair. So the man on the far right is the current Hokage? It appears to be unfinished. No, it's not unfinished, Kiba laughed. Enough, Kurenai said back. Please save your questions for later, Ken. We are currently being observed and evaluated. The times are bad, and paranoia is rampant. We will respond to all of your questions in due course, but for the time being, please remain silent. Ken nodded and remained silent the rest of the way to the large tower at the mountain's base. The team and Ken were led into the Hokage's office, followed by two cloaked mask-wearing ninja who stood on either side of the doorway. The Hokage's high-backed chair slowly swung around to reveal a silver-haired man with a mask covering his lower face and an eye patch covering his left eye. Two scar lines protruded from beneath the patch, forming an X that would meet near the center of the eye. Hokage-sama, Kurenai said. Our mission was a complete success. Recovery has been completed. Hitaki Kakashi leaned forward over the desk, trying to see into the shadows cast by the hood. Please remove the hood. Ken slowly drew back the hood, revealing his horribly deformed face. Kakashi made no apparent reaction to Ken's appearance, but the Hokage's single eye moved back and forth to look into Ken's cerulean blue eyes. Anbu, you are not required at this time. You are free to leave, Kakashi said quietly. As they teleported out of the office, the two cloaked ninja vanished in tiny puffs of smoke. Kakashi stood up and walked around the desk to face Ken. They found you, Naruto. My name is Ken, Hokage-sama. I have no recollection of the Naruto character that people claim I am. Kakashi exchanged a puzzled look with Kurenai. We discovered seals associated with chakra and memory seals placed on Naruto. At this point, our best guess is that whatever happened to Naruto was planned and premeditated. Because he has no recollection of his life as Naruto, we have agreed to call him by his current given name, Ken, for his own peace of mind. Then we'll use Ken, Kakashi said, nodding. Kakashi turned around and returned to his seat behind the desk. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, Ken. We can answer some of them, but not all. We'll need to have our best people examine these seals to see if there's anything we can do for you. You have been dismissed, Team Kurenai. Hinata, if you could stay for now, the rest of you are free to go. I know your families are expecting you. Kurenai, Shino, and Kiba all bowed slightly before exiting the office through the front door. Hinata stood next to Ken until the door shut. Ken, there are many questions that need to be answered before we can proceed, Kakashi said again. First and foremost, are you coming to us willingly? Yes, I am, Ken nodded. Hinata informs me that we are married. I've been looking like this since I woke up in that valley. Ken motioned to his face. I was afraid no one would want me until a beautiful woman told me I was her missing husband. It sounds like something out of a play, but I'm curious, so I came. Kakashi gave a nod. Well, before we can officially bring you back, we need to do a few things. First, our doctors must conduct a medical examination to ensure that you are indeed Uzumaki Naruto. Then a light interrogation to ensure you're telling us the truth to the best of your ability and to examine those seals on your body. We've been at odds with the Sound Village for the past 5 years, and there are precautions that must be taken. I get it, Hokage-sama. I'll do whatever is required, Ken replied. Good. Hinata, take Ken to the hospital for a full enemy contact exam while I notify the interrogation division of what will be required. Hinata nodded and motioned Ken to follow her. Kakashi turned his chair back to face the window as the pair left the office. Why did they need to find him right now? We're already on the verge of civil war in Konoha, and Naruto could be the catalyst for the end of everything. The Konoha hospital was bustling with activity, but Hinata led Ken to a separate entrance. This is the special entrance for ninja returning from enemy contact missions. Because you have been out of the country for so long, you should treat your return as such. When the conflict with sound erupted a few years ago, their leaders attempted biological warfare against us. Things weren't anywhere near this complicated up in the valley, Ken observed. Hinata nodded solemnly but motioned for Ken to enter the building via a scanner. Once he was inside, she followed. An Anbu followed the pair inside and spoke in hushed to the nurse on duty. The nurse nodded and turned to look at Ken and Hinata. Is this the person the Hokage wants to have a full physical on, as well as all return protocols? Yes, Hinata said. His papers would be filed under MIA-1138. You seem too familiar with that number, Ken said softly to Hinata. Hinata simply nodded. She knew it was her Naruto, but she didn't trust her voice right now. The nurse motioned Ken forward, and he entered the exam rooms, the door closing with a light thump behind him. Ken finished putting on his cloak and hood an hour later. His arm hurt from the multiple shots, and he walked strangely as a result of the complete exam. He felt like enough blood had been drawn from him that he could walk past a hungry vampire and not be noticed. That was a pretty rigorous exam, Ken remarked. So, what now? I have to take you to the Anbu headquarters for questioning. Ken gave a nod. The two returned to the Hokage Tower. There were few pedestrians on the street, but they all seemed to be in a hurry. Those people in the masks are following us, aren't they? Ken asked, not pausing. You are an unknown quantity right now, and thus suspect. They will not follow you once you have returned as one of us. This place is bright and sunny, and the day is warm, but there is a chill in the air. As if a hammer is poised to crush it. The Sound's leader has pledged the complete destruction of Konoha and all who follow it, Hinata nodded. They've tried everything from biological warfare to double agents and terror attacks to destroy us. The current conflict started with an open attack on the village itself, which caused a lot of trouble. He extended membership in Sound to anyone who desired it. Because of who he was, dozens of shinobi in Kunoichi accepted his offer. Since then, things have only gotten worse. Many people believe the war is dragging on too long, and entire clans are beginning to question the Hokage's tactics, but surrender is not an option. We need to rediscover hope. Hinata took a breather and looked down. They had returned to the tower, where a masked Anbu awaited Ken. You must enter the building without me, Ken. I need to get home and prepare a few things. You'll be moving in with me once they're done with you. Ken saw Hinata turn and leap away. Yamanaka Inoichi entered the interrogation room and examined the man's scarred and melted face. Among the wreckage, the remains of blonde brows could be seen. Is this supposed to be Naruto? He appears to be a shambles, but it is what is on the inside that counts. Ken-san, my name is Yamanaka Inoichi. I'll perform a preliminary mind scan jutsu on you to see if you pose any kind of threat to Konoha. We'll both get through this quickly and painlessly if you relax and cooperate. Ken nodded, but his face was filled with fear. Inoichi realized it was very similar to how any civilian would react to ninja techniques. We will need to secure you so that you do not thrash around during the process as fear becomes a larger factor for the person being scanned, Inoichi continued. For this procedure to work properly, you must be alert. I understand, Ken nodded again. I will assist in any way I can. Inoichi approached Ken from behind and began. Ken's mental landscape. Inoichi rummaged through Ken's memories for a while. They were tedious for the seasoned mindwalker, but he did his job. Inoichi left Ken's memories to go to the seat of his consciousness after the memories all stopped at a certain age. Inoichi entered what appeared to be a blacksmith forge hidden beneath a large underground cistern. Light appeared to be coming from vent holes in a manhole cover on the open space's roof. It's odd. Why would a forge be inside a sewer? Mindscapes normally reflect the person's mind and experiences, but it appears that the forge was built within a previous framework. The disparities are far too great. It appears that a large portion of his mind and memories have been sealed off. Now it's time to find the seal itself. Inoichi walked around the cistern's edge until he came to a shallow passage on one of the walls. To his trained eye, the marks of a seal were clearly visible, and he examined how it was represented in Ken's mind. The bricks that blocked the passage appeared to be heavy and able to withstand a lot of damage before breaking. Inoichi knew he needed to see the underlying seal before making his final decision. He concentrated his chakra against the wall itself, revealing the structure of the seal. As the seal came into view, lines began to appear on the bricks. A backlash struck Inoichi and threw him out of Ken's mind the moment the seal was fully revealed. As the Anbu in attendance began to draw weapons, Inoichi stumbled back from Ken, but Ibiki and Inoichi both motioned for them to stand down. Ken as he is now is not a threat to Konoha or any of our people, Inoichi reported. His mind and memories show no contact with the enemy, but they also show nothing prior to the dates he provided. His memories before that are sealed away with the strongest seal I've ever seen. I need to notify the Hokage. Ibiki dismissed Inoichi with a nod. Ken was released by an aide, who stretched and rubbed his head. That felt strange, Ken said. You are free to go to any civilian areas of Konoha until we can do something about that seal, Ibiki simply nodded. You will be denied access to training grounds and official buildings unless accompanied by an escort. Ken gave a nod. When delivering finished goods for Kama, he was familiar with the restrictions in the daimyo's keep. Ibiki motioned to a chunin. This chunin will accompany you to the Uzumaki estate and out of the building. We will contact you again in the future, Ken. The memory seal on you will most likely be removed at some point, but it will require some planning. Ken pursued Chunin through the streets. Outside, it was nearly dusk, and the streets were nearly deserted as people hurried home before curfew. As they moved into what appeared to Ken to be more prosperous areas, the houses gave way to more open estates. A few ninja with white eyes like Hinata passed Ken and looked at him strangely without saying anything. The Chunin had said nothing to Ken until they came to a halt in front of a small estate's gate. A white spiraled circle was a symbol on the door. The Chunin rang the bell and waited quietly until the gate opened. Hinata stood in a casual kimono as the Chunin bowed and walked away without saying anything. Hinata bowed and smiled at Ken. Welcome home, Ken-kun, she said quietly as she motioned for him to enter. Ken bit his lower lip nervously as he passed through the portal Hinata had closed behind him. I had a spare bedroom ready in case you didn't want to spend it with me right now. The few items you brought are waiting for you. You only need to tell me if you want to change that. How did you find the exam? The guy, who was nearly as scarred as me, said I was free to move around in all civilian areas alone but would need an escort in any training ground or official building. Do you think we could get my hammer back at some point? I'll have the groundskeeper bring it to me in the morning. We have servants, you know? Only 3, a maid, a groundskeeper, and a cook, Hinata says softly. The Uzumaki family is small, but not impoverished. It would take some time to explain everything, but rest assured that everyone is happy to be here. Ken slowly nodded. Servants would be an entirely new experience for him. The surprises continued to hit Ken hard, as so many things that these people took for granted came as a surprise to him. Do you think I could go to my room right now? Everything that happened earlier today has made my head hurt. It has been a difficult journey. If I may, I'd like to take a short break. Hinata nodded and smiled as she led Ken to a small bedroom at the back of the house. Ken lay down after closing the door to the room behind him. He'd only rolled onto his side when he fell asleep. Kakashi was exhausted. Another probing attack by sound had been repulsed, with no Konoha forces injured. He was fortunate that the Nara clan had remained loyal, and Shikaku and Shikamaru were two of the elemental country's best strategists. He realized he only had a few more reports to go over before he could relax. A knock on the door shattered that hope as he invited the person inside. "Hokage-sama, I have the preliminary report on Naruto," Inoichi said as he entered the office. "Alright, go ahead." Naruto does, in fact, have a memory seal on him. It is the most powerful I have ever seen, and removing it will take some time. He has had no contact with anyone who is considered Konoha's enemy. His memories have not been tampered with, so he is safe for the time being. He has access to civilian areas of the village per your orders. After questioning, he was returned to the Uzumaki estate. Inoichi gave Kakashi a report on the findings. "Now, Inoichi," Kakashi said, without even looking at it. "What else did you discover that you didn't dare to include in the report?" "I'm not sure who is a spy for the enemy, Kakashi-sama," Inoichi said, looking down for a moment before looking back up. "So this is strictly for your ears." The seal found on Naruto. It's a reworked Konoha memory seal. Ken awoke to the sound of a light tapping on the door to his room. "Yes?" he said as he sat up and opened his crusty eyes. "Ken-sama, Lady Hinata asked me to wake you as it was already mid-morning and she had some errands to run before lunch. She asked if I could take you to the bathhouse and show you where you could take care of your personal needs." Ken stretched and heard several pops from his back as his muscles relaxed. He realized he hadn't even changed his clothes the night before. A quick sniff revealed that he was in desperate need of a bath. Ken walked in and followed the maid to the bathhouse. A tidy house near noon. Ken waited for Hinata to return from her errands in the Western-style dining room. As the minutes passed, he fought back his nervousness. Hinata finally entered with a few bags and a warm smile for Ken. "I see you've finally gotten up. You looked like you needed to sleep, so I let you sleep through breakfast and woke Suki up in time for lunch. What did you do all morning?" Ken inquired. "Of course, shopping. We can't have you walking around Konoha like a bumpkin. I ordered a few kimonos for you and picked up some basic exercise clothing." Suki entered the room with dishes and proceeded to set the table as Hinata took a seat near one end of the table. Before Ken could say anything, he was drawn to a sound in the hall, a step followed by a light thump. The sound kept repeating and getting closer. The room was then entered by a middle-aged blonde woman with slightly graying blonde hair in two low ponytails. She was walking with a cane and appeared to favor one leg. She walked in and looked at Ken, who stood up and bowed. She drew Ken into a bone-crushing hug, and her voice caught as she spoke. "So she did eventually find you, Naruto. I know she said you're going by Ken for now, but you'll always be Naruto to me. Gaki, I've missed you." Ken returned the hug but was still perplexed. "I would have missed you too, but I don't remember anything from here. Could you please tell me your name?" "My name is Tsunade, but you Gaki always called me Ba-chan," she said with a smile. "It used to bother me a lot, but in recent years it has become something I have missed." Tsunade let go of Ken's embrace and stumbled back until he steadied her. She leaned back in one of the chairs. Ken could immediately see why they ate in this room because the blonde woman would struggle in low chairs. Tsunade responded to Ken's unasked question, an old war wound. "There's a lot going on that you're not aware of, Gaki. We're throwing you into the deep end and hoping you can swim." When a child's voice rang out in the room and a blonde streak ran past Ken, he was once again at a loss. "You've arrived. Mommy, you've arrived." The blonde streak that ran into Hinata yelled. Hinata's chair slid back a few inches as a result of the impact. Hinata smiled broadly as she bent over to hug the child and lift her into her lap. Hinata gasped for air as the girl wrapped her arms around her neck and squeezed. "How did you behave while staying with Tsunade-sama?" Hinata inquired of the child. The girl's head nodded quickly, as if she had something to hide. Hinata cast a glance at Tsunade, who smirked and nodded. Ken smiled briefly at the scene until the girl let go of Hinata and returned his gaze. The girl jumped off Hinata's lap and faced Ken. She straightened her kimono before bowing and saying, "Good day, sir." "Hello and welcome to the Uzumaki household. Uzumaki Kushina is my name." Ken just stood there staring at the child. The girl resembled Hinata, but with two major differences. Her hair was a bright yellow, and her all-white eyes were blue, whereas her mother's were lavender. After Ken had stood silently in shock for more than a minute, Kushina turned to her mother and said quietly, "Mommy, did I do it correctly?" He hasn't said anything in response. "You did everything correctly, sweetie. Ken is genuinely surprised to meet you." Hinata turned to face Ken. Kushina is Naruto's daughter, Ken. Her grandmother was named after Naruto's mother. Ken recovered from his shock and returned to the girl. "Ken is my given name. I used to have another name, but I don't remember anything about it." Kushina examined Ken carefully before asking, "Did it hurt a lot when you got those owies on your face?" Hinata flushed, while Tsunade burst out laughing. With that sense of tact, she is definitely Naruto's daughter. Ken smiled wryly but replied to Kushina, "I'm not sure if it hurt or not. Neither do I have those memories." Kushina simply smiled and said okay before returning her attention to her mother. "Zashi-kun does not wish to resume training with grandfather, Mommy. Grandfather mentioned that he might have to bill you for his lunch one of these days." "Zashi?" Ken inquired. "Uzumaki Hazashi is Kushina's half-hour younger twin brother. He was named after my father's twin brother, my uncle." "Twins? Naruto fathered twins?" "No, I had twins," Hinata said with a chuckle. After that, Hinata's face darkened. He vanished before he even realized they were approaching. They were honeymoon children. She bit her lower lip to keep the tears from falling. The twins will be 7.5 years old soon. I was fortunate in how things turned out. My original clan decided to be civil and assist in some ways. Tsunade-sama also moved in with her favorite niece and nephew after stepping down as Hokage. Not by blood, of course, but in the heart, Tsunade clarified in response to Ken's puzzled look. Ken sat down and returned his gaze to Hinata and Kushina. The punches just kept coming. Naruto appears to have had a much better life than Ken. Everything he had ever desired was waiting for him here: a wife, a family, and a past. But they were all owned by someone else. Someone who was trapped within him. The cost of obtaining those items could be his own demise. Inoichi was rummaging through seal scroll after seal scroll in the Anbu library. He had no trouble locating the original memory seal. The additions reminded him of something he had only glanced at once many years before. He had gotten as close as he could to what he was looking for, but the source bothered him. It was a mention of a prototype seal discovered among papers recovered from Orochimaru's lab after the dead snake Sanin had finally fled Konoha. Inoichi went to Ibiki's office to gain access to the library's forbidden section in order to examine the original notes. Hinata went out with Kushina to look for her missing son, but Tsunade grabbed Ken's arm and pulled him into a small room. He was taken aback when he discovered it was a medical exam room. What is the point of it all? They gave me a physical yesterday, he inquired. Gaki, be quiet. That was for general health. The doctors there aren't experts like me. I am also responsible for the twins' medical needs. Now I'm going to assess you against my standards. I'll do a basic scan to see if I can help with your scarring. I'm not great at cosmetic work, but I've learned a few tricks over the years. Ken simply nodded and agreed with the older blonde. He was lying on the table as she ran her glowing hand over his body. He listened to her mutter as she took notes as she walked. Muscle mass appears to be normal. Above average range for a shinobi, but fits the job description of a smith. Chakra coils are the size of a high jonin but appear to have been larger in the past. This is also consistent with the lack of chakra circulation over the last 8 years. Tsunade approached Ken's face, her hand moving much more slowly now. Scarring on the face is primarily cosmetic. It appears that it was done primarily to obscure and distort facial features. That's interesting. Residual marks known as whiskers no longer appear. That will be followed up on later. Burn scars are deeper on that side of the face and indicate fire jutsu damage. The abrupt end of the scarring would also indicate this, as the collar of Naruto's flame-retardant uniform ends near that point. Heavy burn scar tissue could be debrided to reduce appearance but not completely removed without extensive surgery or tissue regeneration. Tsunade took a step back and turned off her recording at that point. Everything is finished, Ken. So? Well, I can tell you're as fit as a horse. Your only real physical challenge is the scarring on your face. The cut scars can be lightened slightly, but they will still be visible. I can use chakra to thin out the scar tissue from the burns. Ken slowly nodded. He could transform from hideous to just plain ugly. Hinata stated that you were Hokage and that your face was on the mountain. I suppose it must have been something really bad that left you crippled. Yes, it was pretty bad, Tsunade said slowly. She sat on a chair in the office and rolled up her pants leg. Her lower leg was amputated below the knee, and she wore a prosthetic limb. I'll tell you about it later this evening after the kids have gone to bed and I've had a few drinks. In the last 8 years, a lot has happened in Konoha. Ken and Tsunade went to the front gate when they heard the door chime. The maid had beaten them to the door, and there was a chunin waiting in the foyer. Tsunade-sama, Ken-san, the Hokage has requested Ken's presence as soon as possible. I'm doing nothing, so I'll be right there, Ken said to the chunin. Tsunade offered to accompany Ken to Kakashi. Please inform him that we will be there shortly. Tsunade turned to get her green smock with the kanji fort gamble on the back as the chunin bowed and left. She threw Ken's hooded cloak aside and said, Ken, come on. I'll show you around Konoha for a nickel. However, does Hokage Kakashi not want to see me right away? Ken inquired. That's why he'll have to wait a couple of hours. It's an old joke, believe me. Ken walked alongside Tsunade as the lady pointed out various Konoha attractions. People politely greeted Tsunade the entire time, but few said anything other than greetings. He was thankful for his hood because it allowed him to conceal his scarred appearance. A few suspicious looks were cast his way, but once people realized he was with Tsunade, few said anything. Ken was put on edge by the town's atmosphere. It was a warm sunny day, but the vibe he got from the people was one of paranoia. Ken and Tsunade entered Kakashi's office 2 hours after receiving the message from the chunin. Kakashi raised his eyebrows at Tsunade. I expected him to arrive hours ago. We were on our way here but Ken forgot the way so we just wandered along the road of life until we found the place, Tsunade grinned. Tsunade burst out laughing as Kakashi sighed softly. Did I really sound that stupid all those years ago? You did, indeed. I knew it wasn't a big deal because of what the Chunin said, or the wording would have been different. Tsunade sat uninvited, but Kakashi remained silent. Her sitting was one of the privileges he granted her after taking office. Kakashi turned to face Ken. We will need a few days to prepare to remove the memory seal from you. We intend to leave the chakra seal in place until we know how well the unsealing went. But, for the time being, do you have any requests or needs? Ken then looked down at Kakashi. So, if possible, I'd like to see if I can borrow a forge for a few hours. It allows me to unwind by allowing me to work on something. Just sitting around doing nothing makes me antsy. Making simple nails would be a start. I'd also have to free my personal hammer from impound at the gate. Despite his mask, Kakashi appeared surprised. That is not a typical request, but I'll see what I can do about it. Tsunade raised his voice. I'm not sure if the Hyuga still has one from a few decades ago. They made a lot of their own weapons during the Third War. Kakashi gave a nod. Tsunade, you have stronger ties to Hiyashi than I do. Could you approach the Hyuga on Ken's behalf? Oh, sure, Tsunade sarcastically replied. That will be a lot of fun. Give me a formal request letter so they don't get all puffed up and think it's a favor I owe them. Because the Uzumaki are related to the Hyuga, it shouldn't be a problem, but you never know. After a brief conversation with the secretary, Ken received a letter from the Hyuga asking if he could use their old forge. Is there anything else you need right now, Ken? Kakashi inquired. The sound of explosions was heard before Ken could say anything else. When Kakashi turned around, he saw smoke rising from the market district. Damn, yet another bombing, he grumbled. Please return Ken to the Uzumaki compound, Tsunade. I don't want people to think he had anything to do with this because he just arrived. Tsunade nodded and motioned to Ken, who followed her out of the office as people began to leave. Tsunade brought Ken home safely. Few people remained on the streets, but they were all nervously looking around. Ken now understood why he had felt paranoid earlier in the day. Does it always happen like this? He inquired of Tsunade. Tsunade took a large bottle of sake from the sitting room's cabinet. She drank several dishes of rice wine before speaking, not waiting for it to warm. No, not always. Things have improved over the last year. The attacks, combined with Sound's increased activity, have had a negative impact on morale. People are terrified, Ken. This conflict with the Sound is unlike any other between hidden villages. It would be best if I told you the backstory. We've been at odds with the Sound village for 14 years, ever since they attacked us during a Chunin exam. When Uchiha Sasuke killed Orochimaru 11 years ago, the war came to a halt. We never reached any kind of agreement, but neither side went out of their way to attack the other outside of teams colliding. That all changed 5 years ago. Tsunade's life story. We're having an incident at the Eastern Gate, Tsunade-sama. Uchiha Sasuke is standing there looking for you. A messenger said. Tsunade snarled as she smashed the sake cup. Since her little brother vanished 3 years ago, things had been going downhill for the elderly Sanin. Missions to Konoha were gradually declining as a revitalized Sound village grew in the rice country. Rumors and hearsay suggested that one man was behind the Sound's resurgence. That man had arrived at her village's gates. As Tsunade approached the Eastern Gate, alarms rang throughout Konoha. Ninja arrived to warn and gathered near the gates. Tsunade arrived at the open gate to find Sasuke standing just beyond it, arms crossed across his chest. The gate guard was dead in the dirt, and his team, Hawk, was standing behind him. I assume you're not here to surrender yourself, Uchiha, based on the state of my guards? Tsunade let out a growl. I'm not here to issue an ultimatum, old woman. The Sound will launch open warfare on this worthless village in 1 month unless it surrenders to me and my Sound village. I am offering any Konoha ninja the chance to join my village before hostilities begin. Those who do not comply will perish. Well, why don't I just make things easy on both villages and get rid of your traitorous hide right now? Tsunade replied, frowning. She charged forward, ready to strike the smirking Sasuke. When something unexpected happened, Ninja moved to her side. The Anbu who moved to aid Tsunade were apprehended by a swarm of other masked ninja, who brutally slaughtered the elite ninja. The masked traitors then prevented the Chunin and Jonin from assisting their leader. Root, muttered one Jonin. Sasuke drew his sword, Grasscutter, and awaited Tsunade's attack. After the fall of Akatsuki, he took possession of the sword as well as the Sound village. A muttered jutsu and the blade flashed with an electric corona. He dodged her first attack and struck mercilessly. He was swinging his sword before Tsunade had even finished her attack, his Sharingan eyes telling him exactly where and when to strike. The electrified blade flashed down at her trailing leg, severing the limb 4 inches below the knee by slicing completely through the calf and shin bones. The blade's current cauterized the wound as it cut. Tsunade stumbled forward into the dirt, howling in agony. Anger erupted within the walls as ninja rushed to aid their fallen leader. The sword was placed under her chin to prevent the Konoha forces from taking any further action. None of you would want to be blamed for Tsunade's death, would you? Sasuke laughed, but it sounded too much like Orochimaru's. I just wanted to have an uninterrupted conversation with your leader. As Sasuke continued, Tsunade clenched his teeth in pain. Your best teams are all on important missions that I have set up outside of Konoha. The ambushes that are waiting for them should take care of them nicely. You've already lost your beloved Naruto. To make matters even sweeter, one of your own advisors sold you out. An elderly man hobbled out the gate, surrounded by Root's masked ninja. Tsunade hissed, Danzo. Tsunadeheim, you appear surprised. I've been warning you for years that Konoha's policies should be more aggressive, but first you fooled Hiruzen, and then you ignored my advice. Now I'm taking my root and letting the diseased Konoha tree die so that something better can grow in its place. A moment before we leave, Danzo, Sasuke said. I need to make one minor change to our agreement. Sasuke struck quickly and impaled the man on his sword before Danzo could respond. Do you think I'll forget that you ordered the Uchiha's destruction? Sandame's teammates may have slipped from my grasp due to old age, but you were the driving force behind the murders. Oh, Itachi told me what happened before he died. It was confirmed by Orochimaru's notes. Danzo, the Uchiha do not forget those who oppose them. Sasuke quickly drew the sword from Danzo's gut and beheaded him. To me, Root! Sasuke exclaimed. The masked Root ninja all emerged from Konoha and formed a line behind Sasuke. Keep Konoha in mind. You have 1 month to come to me and beg for your lives, or you will perish. Sasuke laughed as he walked away, leaving Tsunade lying in the dirt of the gateway. With that, the traitor had destroyed a large portion of our Anbu. Danzo had infiltrated our elite with far too many of his own people. To make matters worse, not all of the Root left Konoha on that fateful day. He left many traitors in place because we didn't know the extent of his organization. Terrorist attacks continue to remind us of their presence. Only half of our best teams returned from the ambushes set up by Uchiha. We lost so many good ninja because we were careless. Konoha's strength is now only half of what it was when Naruto died. People are giving up because we are losing the war. There have been more missing ninja from Konoha in the last 5 years than in the village's entire history. Some have gone to sound, while others have fled or simply vanished. We even stopped adding names to the memorial stone because it was causing morale problems. I couldn't continue to be Hokage after I lost my leg. Because Kakashi was the best ninja we had left, the clans elevated him to Hokage. He didn't want the job, and it showed. He gets things done, but not with his heart. Tsunade threw away the sake dish and drank straight from the bottle. So many have died. Shizune was murdered by Root the day they left. She was discovered dead in my office, alongside my beloved Tun Tun. Sakura has gone missing. Team Guy survived their ambush, but Neji was blinded. Ino and Choji were dropped from Team Asuma. Kotetsu. Azumo. So many have died. Ken was speechless as Tsunade sobbed in her seat. When a hand brushed against his shoulder, he turned to see Hinata standing there. Kushina and a dark-haired boy her size, whom he assumed was Hizashi, stood beside her. Aunt Tsunade needs hugs, Hinata said to the children. Both children approached the elderly lady and crawled into her lap. Tsunade paused in her tears to wrap an arm around each of the children as they did the same for her. Tsunade had stopped crying within a few minutes. Tsunade, it wasn't losing her leg that broke her. It was the loss of Shizune, Hinata spoke into Ken's ear. Tsunade regarded Shizune as a daughter. We brought her in because she adored Naruto and his children were the light of her life. They always seemed to have Naruto's magical touch of bringing happiness to those around them. After the twins had calmed Tsunade down, they stayed on her lap for a few more minutes. The boy eventually slid down and approached Ken with slightly narrowed eyes. Kushina's blue-tinged white eyes were not as welcoming. Did you manage to make Aunt Tsunade cry? Hizashi. Hinata yelled. Ken extended his hand to her. No, she was telling me about her leg loss. It was horrible, and it made her cry. Hizashi looked at Ken for a few seconds longer before nodding. You're not making that up. Oh? Can you tell such things? Ken inquired, slightly amused. Yes, grandfather has taught me a lot of things. He stated that if Aunt Hanabi does not have children, I will be the Hyuga heir, so I must be prepared. A very serious boy, isn't he? Ken asked of Hinata. Serious, yes, but at least he still thinks about his mother, Hinata smiled back. She returned her gaze to Hizashi, get yourself ready for dinner. We're going to the Hyuga for dinner, and you know your grandfather prefers clean kids. You worked out all day, and it shows. Hizashi nodded and walked out of the house as if he owned it. Hinata rubbed her brow. I swear that boy channeled the old Neji. Anyway, Ken, you need to clean up as well. Peasant chic may work for Tsunade, but I don't think it would work for you. Ken was nervous as he changed his clothes. He was about to have his first meeting with his father-in-law.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.